All right, test 1, 2. Hey folks, welcome aboard. We're going to be getting started in about 25 minutes or so. Just checking out the live stream, the audio, the video. I had some bitrate issues, so I had to play around and figure it out. So we'll go ahead and get started shortly. Thanks for joining. And if you have any questions, feel free to pipe it in and I'll get to them right when we get started. Hello, YouTube. Joe Holbrook here. Looks like we're set up, ready to go. Thanks for joining. We will get started in, let's see, about 12 minutes at the latest. I'll probably start a little bit early just because I know some of you are online, so I appreciate that. I did have some issues last 2 weeks with the live stream, so I wanted to just start a little bit early, validate, all the settings and everything, so everything comes back exactly the way I expect it. So if you have any feedback issues, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know. And this will be the second CBSA live webcast, or I should say live stream. We're going to be talking about basically areas on the exam that generally catch people. That would be Ethereum and Hyperledger, but also some areas around security like hashing. But the exam is extremely passable. And the reality is, I think from talking to some of the BTA folks, it looked like probably there is a 70% pass rate. So that's pretty good. Now, that's very different than some other exams that are out there. So that's for the CBSA. All right, so I'll see you back in about 10 minutes. If there's any questions, just let me know. Okay, welcome aboard, everyone. Let me just double check that this is actually streaming. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to go. So I'm just, forgive my confusion. I'm just making sure, making sure there's a little bit of a delay, and that's okay. I just, there should be, of course, but I'm just trying to get used to it. So I've changed some of the settings. So today, what I'd like to talk about is basically around the types of blockchains that you're going to be tested on the exam. But we'll get into that. But I want to focus on Ethereum and Hyperledger. You're going to see probably 4 to 6 questions on Ethereum and Hyperledger. So I want to clear up those. Those are really easy give me questions. If you can just remember just a few points I'm going to cover. Now, let's see. I hope that the audio is good. It looks like it is on my end. Um, we have two folks online or one online. Um, okay. Well, anyways, we're just trying these things out, these events, trying to see if it makes sense to hold them or not. But with that said, I'm glad you're online. We're going to talk about basically the first thing is let's talk about open source blockchains. And then let's talk about private, permissioned, permissionless blockchains. From an architecture standpoint, let me adjust this. Okay, I think that's better. Now, from an architecture standpoint, one of the things on the exam that you probably want to learn, at least from my experience, from teaching this course, taking the official course, and the exam course, you'll want to make sure that you can understand the value that a permissionless blockchain presents, but also be able to specify a permission blockchain in the right use case. One of the things on the exam that you're going to run into is you'll be tested to validate should you choose a permission blockchain or permissionless. So let's talk about this. We want to have a permissionless blockchain in a lot of scenarios where we may be using a cryptocurrency. We may also want to use one if OPEX or CAPEX is low and we can tie in to like a blockchain such as Neo or Ethereum, um, or any others that are out there that may make sense. Now, we know that if we go with the permissionless blockchain, that we need to give up a few things. One is scalability. So if we're dependent on thousands of nodes around the world, then we know that we're going to have probably induced latency. We're going to have lack of privacy, lack of security. We're also going to need to use open source. We're also not permissioned. Now, as an enterprise, we want to enable benefits or features of an enterprise blockchain for several reasons. Let's say you're a large corporation and you want to control membership. Makes sense, right? As an enterprise, we need to control who accesses our blockchain. However, what about if you want to have the benefits of permission and permissionless? Maybe you want to have a side chain or an off chain, or we want to use channels for specific purposes. Now, let's talk about Ethereum. So I'm trying to share my screen here. So let me share my screen. It's easy to walk you through this than to go back and forth if I don't need to. So give me a sec to share my screen. Okay, I'm resetting the audio. Give me one sec. Okay, can you hear me? All right, so I could see it and I can hear it. Good stuff here. All right, a little bit better than last time. All right. Now, what I'd like to do is talk about smart contracts. But before we get started, I need to talk about, because this is where I want to say probably the easiest or the most straightforward questions will come from. Now, when we talk about blockchains, a couple things come to mind. You want to make sure that you know the benefits and the pros and cons, the benefits and the not so benefits, right? So just realize that if you have a question, and I have some practice ones I'm going to bring up. Let's say that if the question's asking you about what are two benefits of a customer choosing a permission blockchain, and you have four answers. The first answer is security. The second answer is privacy. The fourth answer, actually, the third answer is transparency. Or the fourth answer might be something like performance. Now, depending on how the answer reads and how you want to understand the question, you have to understand that a private blockchain may or may not be fully permissioned. So that's just something to think about. So it could be hybrid. So depending on the answers and the question, you want to consider those things. But generally, too, don't confuse privacy and security. What is privacy? Let's think of privacy as being able to participate in a transaction that is confidential between two parties. Now, security or privacy could also be the blockchain or on a channel, but it's not going to be available outside of the blockchain, right? So that's really the key. Now, security is a little different. Security can mean several things, but from a blockchain perspective, let's think of this as a way to mitigate vulnerabilities. And we will talk about, assuming time permits tonight, some of the vulnerabilities that you may run into. Now, the good part is that you really only need to know for this exam what a 51% attack is. If you take the security professional exam, then that's another story in itself. So let's not worry about vulnerabilities except for the 51% attack. But I do want to cover that. Okay. Now, let me get my mouse over here. All right. Now, I think you should be able to see this. Give me I got a delay of about 10 seconds. Okay. So that looks like you can see the highlight. Now, let's take this step by step. The header contains information about the block itself, including platform version, timestamp, difficulty level, the nonce. What is the nonce? Okay, we need to know that word. And let me put it in the chat and give me a second to type it. So make sure you know this word. You're going to see that again. Basically, a nonce is a random number. So that's what you want to really pay attention to. And it's going to be part of the blocks header. Any questions so far? Okay. If there's any questions, anything I don't cover, just let me know. Now, let me move my mouse here. Hold on. Now, one more thing I think is important to talk about is right here. Okay. So blockchains are append only, right? If we think about it, a blockchain does what? And I'm typing something. Okay. So basically, blockchains append. They do not, by definition, and again, I know it's the Wild West out there when it comes to blockchains and distributed ledgers because everyone's got their own take on this. But by the de facto standard of Bitcoin in 2009 and 2008, the white paper, we know that the blockchain is append only. You can't delete, you can't modify. Now, a traditional database does what? you can you can edit or delete, right? Or modify whatever you want to call it. Members, a blockchain can only create and read, and then a database can create, read, update, and delete. Now, some blockchains or distributed ledgers, such as Hyperledger, have an interesting take on this. And that's dependent on if you look at the transaction log or the ledger. And I'll talk briefly about that if time permits when we get to Hyperledger section. Now, one other thing to point out is over here. We need to know the difference between public and private blockchain. Now, out of the 70 questions, you can expect 2 to 3 questions to just be tagging you or testing you, whatever you want to say. Um, I hate to word these test. It sounds elementary, but that's what's really happening. So just trying to make sure you know a public blockchain and a private blockchain. So remember, private is a permission blockchain. A public blockchain is an open. If we go and use Ethereum, that is a public blockchain. If we use Hyperledger, then that's what? A private blockchain. And again, these are straightforward questions. They're not trying to validate your Vitalik Buterin or anything. They just want to know that you know the basics. So that's why I really like this exam, because it really targets a niche that is technical but not too technical, and it opens up the doors to a lot of other folks that may not be technical, like a Unix administrator or a Java programmer, you know. So if you're a pre-sales engineer, then this is a great exam. Systems architect, same thing, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and speed this up. I've got another 15 pages I want to get through. I want to get through some practice questions and then also answer any questions as well. All right. So open and close blockchains. Now, and again, this is how the blockchain world sort of makes things a little bit, I guess, what I would call kludgy, in the sense that the terminology may sound the same, but it sort of means something very different, and you just want to understand that. All right. So open and closed, but then we just talked about what? Public and private, right? At the high level, it sounds pretty much the same thing, right? Now let's talk about what open and closed. Open blockchains is where everyone can read the data. This is basically transparency. We have transparency. If you have a blockchain and you want to allow, let's say, your customer base to view transactions, but the membership is permissioned, then that's an open blockchain where you're allowing, it's really a hybrid blockchain, but if you think about it, some of the blockchains that are being released have the capability to allow openness and closedness all at the same time. Okay, so open blockchain, pretty much anyone can read it. So that means you can go right now and view the Ethereum Explorer and view the transactions. So if you go to Ethereum Blockchain Explorer, and there's several of them, like Etherstats, That is transparency. That's an open blockchain in action. Now, if you try to use the Hyperledger Explorer, actually, it should be basically the Hyperledger Fabric Explorer, then basically that's a closed blockchain utility that's only for the permission members. So that wouldn't be open. Okay. So closed is really permission. That's really the difference. So don't confuse these terms. You'll guarantee you're going to see each one of these on the exam. Now, when we talk about open source is what? This is where you have typically could be a consortium, a development group. Some of the examples of that would be the Hyperledger organization or the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, where these organizations are promoting open source and they're allowing their blockchain development to be open. You could download the source code, you can modify it, you could update it. That's open source. Blockchains are generally open source. So one of the properties of the blockchain is generally it's open source. So make a note of that. Okay, we know what a smart contract is. Hopefully, if you're taking this course, you probably know what it is. If you don't, that's okay too. Let's make sure we understand. Smart contracts, you're going to absolutely see 3 to 4 questions on what they are, the value, the benefits, basically why use them, how to use them, and the pros and cons. Now, let's talk first before I actually highlight anything. A smart contract is neither smart nor is it a contract. And this is where I think the industry is really just overusing or actually exaggerating sort of the capabilities. The reality is a smart contract is only going to do what the developer programs it to do. And it is not a contract. It is essentially nothing more than a microservice that is executing based on a condition. It is essentially executing based on a trigger. Whatever that trigger is that payment received? Or did the owner of the property file for the deed, pay for the taxes, whatever the contract's trying to represent? So that's one thing that I have found confuses people. The reality is it is neither smart nor contract. Now, what I want you to know about it is that it is essentially computer code that is developed specifically to execute a specific task, whatever that task is. It could be receiving funds, sending an alert, whatever you want to do. So we'll talk now tomorrow for those interested, and I'm not trying to do self-promotion, but for those that are interested in smart contracts, there's a webinar tomorrow on quickstart.com that I'm holding. It's free. It's 4 p.m. tomorrow. Feel free to join in. We'll dive more into these. Now, we know that smart contracts were created for a reason. What were these reasons? autonomy, backup, efficiency, cost savings. These are the things I want to make sure you know. Now, how does a smart contract provide autonomy? Well, it does that in the manner that it's programmed to. In other words, it doesn't need someone to kick it off. It doesn't have an intermediary saying, yes, we received the funds. Go ahead and close the transaction. The smart contract can be developed by anyone. So basically, if you're already a programmer, there is very little learning curve to a smart contract, to be very honest. Now, if you're using Solidity, so here's one thing I want you to remember. Let me go ahead and put it in the chat here. Give me one sec. Okay. So make sure you are able to select the four things that a smart contract provides. So I'm going to paste it in there. It's probably not very neat. Give me one sec. Okay. Again, backup, autonomy. And again, know these five items, and they think that's a pain. Okay, they only allowed 200 characters. So hold on, sorry, trying to trying to make this efficient. Sometimes it's so efficient, it's inefficient. Okay, and again, let me see. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all a GitHub as well. So let me do that before I go. And I'll paste the link in there. And I'm going to load some study material as well. Okay. Now, so make sure, just make sure you know these five areas, right? I'm not going to cover each one individually. It's very straightforward. But for time purposes, I want to try to cover at least one chapter and some practice questions. Okay. Now, tokens and coins. What is a token and what is a coin? Now, there's also two types of tokens. Let's talk about what a coin is. A coin is essentially a way to transfer value. Now, generally, a coin is going to be some kind of financial transfer, generally a coin. And a coin is what? Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, Monero, etc. And there's what? 1,500 more, right? Now, a token is really different. However, I could see how people get confused because, and let me get some water. Okay. Because of the fact that tokens are traded pretty much like coins. And so you have Ethereum, for example, being traded like Bitcoin. And in reality, they weren't really created to be really doing that. And so that has really, in my opinion, held hostage some of the development capabilities on Ethereum. But again, you know, it's all about the image sometimes, not the merits. Technology is all about marketing and not so much about merit. Okay, just look at the iPhone or just look at how Betamax lost out to VHS. and so on and so on and so on. Okay. But anyways, you get the point. What I want to do is make sure you get this because this is actually a little confusing if you haven't actually, if you didn't take the course or you don't have the additional study material, these could be questions that might confuse you. So you want to know that a token is going to be used for trading. Generally, it's exchange for use, or it could be for equity. And there's two types. You want to make sure you get this. Just make sure we get this because these are give me questions. But if you never saw this, you would know how to approach the question. All right, makes sense? So equity tokens, basically, for example, Dash is a good example. Dash is a equity token. In other words, if you're a miner or basically participating in the Dash blockchain, you're basically holding equity, a stake. That's why it's called a stake-based platform. Now, utility tokens are different. This is basically Ethereum. And this is what I was saying. Ethereum wasn't really developed to be traded like Bitcoin. So Ether, definitely is all over the map. Now, don't get me wrong, it's been great, especially if you had some stake in it there. But with that said, just realize that initially this wasn't really, I think, the design from talking to a lot of the folks that really been in it since day one. Now, utility token. This is so that you could use the Ethereum blockchain. So you purchase Ether so that you could use the Ethereum virtual machine. Now, there's another term that we're going to talk about here in a minute, and it's called gas. And how does gas play into this? Like I said, on the exam, there's going to be 4 to 5 questions on Ethereum and Hyperledger. I'm trying to get you set up for success to make sure you get those questions. Okay, so let's cover this. On the exam, know these two. Okay, give me question. Remember, this could be 2 points or whatever it works out. So equity tokens represent ownership. That will be like Dash. Utility tokens are a usage credit to use the platform. Example, Ethereum. Okay. Now, for those familiar with Bitcoin, you know that if you want to put in a proposal or make a change or provide documentation, you use what's called a BIP. Now, Ethereum has its own comparable. It's called an ERC. So this is an Ethereum token standard. Basically, it's called an ERC. Okay. So there's 3 here. On the exam, you need to know the difference between fungible and non-fungible. Now, this actually does have it. I was saying that. Okay. On the exam, for example, a non-fungible token is ERC 721. Now, what does fungible means? Basically, it's meant to basically be an improvement, but it's really not meant to be modified or updated or changed on the fly. Now, one more thing to point out. Okay, so ERC 20 is the most current, or actually the most common. Now, this is the only accepted ERC standard. Now, that's not totally true, but on the exam, you just need to know. Now, if you're taking the Ethereum developer, we'd have to spend 20 minutes just on this section. But I just want to make sure that you understand ERC20 and ERC721. I didn't see anything about 223, but it's there. It's in the content. It could be testable. Okay, so do we understand that? So, an ERC 721 is used for tokenization. It's non-tradable. So, for example, and this is actually a good example. Now, when you get certified with the Blockchain Training Alliance, you will get essentially your own record on the blockchain. So you will be issued a what type of token? An ERC721 token. This is not really something that you're going to be traded. ERC20 is what? This is essentially used for tokenization. This is what powers the Ethereum platform. In other words, you go buy Ethereum from your cryptocurrency exchange. That would be an ERC20 example. ERC721 would be what? You getting your BTA cert and having your record on the blockchain. Pretty cool, right? So I hope that's an easy way to remember the difference. Now, the confusing part. Let me get some water. This one here, I found that a lot of folks don't totally grasp the difference between gas and ether, and they're very different. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Now, a couple interesting factoids. When you go to an exchange, I guess like Coinbase, right? And you just buy Ethereum, that's an ERC20 token. However, you have to convert that token into what is gas. Now, gas, I like to compare gas to essentially an estimate. It's an estimate of the EVM power or resources that you have to use to run a smart contract. Now, an easy way to facilitate gas is through MetaMask. Now, MetaMask is essentially a Chrome plugin that you could use to help facilitate, for example, a smart contract in your browser without having to download a full node. And you could also use it with Rinkerbee and other test networks, but also on the main net. Now, let me just point out one more thing here. I think I skipped over it. Now, again, gas is what? This is a way to estimate how much you're going to use in resources. But this is also how the miners get rewarded. In other words, if you need to purchase $20 in Ether to run a smart contract, you have to purchase that amount of Ether and convert that into gas. And that gas estimate will tell you how much gas you need. Now, let me bring up, and give me a second here, because there could be a little delay here. Okay, let me bring up my browser. I'm going to bring it over to this monitor. Give me one sec. Okay, give me 1 minute. Um, why is that? Let me try this. Okay. If anyone does a lot of live streaming and you have suggestions on live stream software, love to know your feedback on other solutions. Okay. Okay. So that should be propagating. Give it about another 10 seconds. Again, the challenge with live streaming is always a give and take, performance over usability and latency and all that. Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, test. Okay, there we go. All right, so I am using a solution called Wirecast. Not the easiest to use. Okay, now MetaMask. Now, before I get started, you could see here that I have the main Ethereum network. If I want to go and test, there's several test networks. One of the things I'd recommend you do is download MetaMask. You'll see certainly a question or two on this. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now, you could see that I had to, let's see, sent a few transactions for a contract back in January. And then I also received some Ether, um, or sent it, I should say, as well. And then if I want, when I'm looking at this, I could also change to the test network, and this will use basically test Ether, which is actually pretty cool because you're using a test net and you're not actually using, real Ethereum or anything. And then there's Rinkeby and Coven. Now, if you do want to test, you do want to go out and propose to facilitate basically a request. You may need to go, for example, and post something on Twitter and then actually post something on Twitter. And then what you do is then send that in to the Rothstein address and basically send them your wallet address for Ethereum, and then they'll send you some test Ether to use. So you could see that that's how, if you did want to use that. So we have MetaMask. So a couple things to point out is that MetaMask is essentially, so this is our key here, and then I could view my account on Etherscan. Now, what is Etherscan? This is a blockchain explorer. Why do we want to use a blockchain explorer? and I'll wait, it should pop up there in a second. We want to use a blockchain explorer to be able to view our transactions. The explorer gives us what? Transparency. So I could go over here and I could view this transaction hash. So you could see that from this address to this address. It tells you if it was completed. And then this is the hash right here. I can copy and paste it, etc. But Etherscan is one of the blockchain explorers. Now, if I go here, you can see that it lists the types of token. So if I go here to ERC20, these are tokens that are what? They're basically fungible tokens. In other words, we could trade them. And you could see over here the list of the token. So one of the popular ones, right, that you may have heard of is going to be BAT is fairly widely used, and then Golem as well. And I think I lose count of how many there are now. Yeah, there's 18 times like 50. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of tokens. Now, the reality is most of these tokens only have maybe a few hundred users, not exactly a wide use case. So a total of 168,000 token contracts. These are the number of contracts. And then these are the tokens listed. Now, if we go here, also before you take the exam, you may want to also go over here to 721. Now, you can see here it says 721. So you could see here, and I wanted to point out one thing. Yeah, so it's over 1,108. So if you scroll down here, you can, of course, look at the different types of tokens. So this is like gaming or certifications. And let's see, where is the one I was looking at? This is a land, basically transfer. This is like a virtual reality game, I think. It's called Decentralized Land. This is actually sort of interesting. If you go to the site here, take a look at it. It's sort of cool what they're doing. So it's like getting your own cyber real estate. And again, you go scroll around. It won't take up a lot of time. So know what a 721 is in ERC20. Understand too, Etherscan or Etherstats are blockchain explorers. And let me see here. And where is it? Oh, here it is. I know I have it because I'm there every day. All right. So this is a blockchain explorer as well. I would recommend, if you haven't spent a few minutes, to take a look at this. This is your blockchain explorer, one of them. Now, when you go over here, and hold on a sec. I think I hit the, there it is. Okay. And again, you can look at the tokens over here and the 721 tokens as well. So this is a blockchain explorer. There's three major ones out there, and you can see that they have pretty much the same links and same view. And then let me go close that out. Oops, okay. All right, so that's sort of what I want to cover. I think there's one more thing I want to talk about. So MetaMask is a plugin. Now, if you want to download it, you haven't played around with it, it's a very simple Chrome extension. Go over to metamask.io. And how are we doing on time? Okay, we got about 10 minutes or so. Any questions? All right. So there's a Chrome extension, and then you could also use the Brave browser. I've not ever used that, so I don't have much feedback on it. But you definitely want to play with the Chrome extension. Now, what's cool is if you go down here, they used to have, hmm, where is it? Oh, here it is. Yeah, there's a link here on how you get started developing and how to use MetaMask. So this is the GitHub as well. It's got the FAQs and everything, and they walk you through this step by step. So there's a lot of good resources over here. And then they also walk you through how you could buy Ether from Coinbase. It's also, for those that not familiar with MetaMask, it's already tied in to Coinbase and it's like one click to buy it. You just have to make sure you have your keys, basically your crypto keys, to be able to do that. Okay, so I think that's good. And let me bring up, oops, close that. Now I wanted to just talk about the objectives before we closed out very briefly. And then let me give you the code and a GitHub address for additional study material. Now, for those folks that are interested, and if you're a Pearson Safari member, I do have training on Pearson Safari. You can go ahead and, of course, join that. The membership's $30 a month for unlimited online and live training for that matter, which is by far, in my opinion, the best deal in the training world. Okay. Now, there it is. Okay. I get a word view here. Okay. So, so the last time we talked, okay, this is really, man, this live stream's killing my laptop. Okay. So the skill set. So this is what you want to review to make sure that you have a good foundation before you take the exam. Now, if you do want to take the exam, let me show you how you could use the code that you'll save $90 on the exam. As far as what you want to study, this is the objectives. They don't call it objectives, they call it a skill set. So basically, we talked about smart contracts, we talked about some of the programming languages, Ethereum, Solidity we didn't get to cover, but maybe we'll try it again and get some more time on that. We talked about private and permission blockchains, use cases. We also talked about public blockchains. But again, there's a lot more to cover. This is a 3-day class if you did want to take like the full official course. So let me show you the discount code and I'm going to post it in the YouTube chat. Now, what's cool is that you could use this code for pretty much the study guide, so you get a discount on that, and any exam. And that is the code. It's JH30YT. Now, let me show you how you sign up to get the discount, make it easy. So you go here to the exam page Okay, hold on. Man, you think I downloaded 7 blockchains or something. Like, man, this YouTube is killing me. All right, so that's the link. Now, go over here, add to cart, and you'll see that. Let me go ahead and remove that. Okay. Now, also, too, I just removed it just because I keep on showing people and I forget to remove it. Just want to make sure you see it the way you need to see it. Okay. So we have the CBSA exam. Now, down here, they throw in the additional training. Now, you can add these if you want and get a discount. However, chances are you probably don't want to pay $249 for the on-demand training. Now, the study guide with the discount is like $21, $22. And the exam with the discount is $300. Now, the online training is great, but again, it seems a little pricey compared to everything else out there. That's just my feedback I had for them. Okay, so we have that. So let's check out. And what you want to do before you fill this out, so you go ahead and enter the discount. Let me go ahead and remove the discount and just show you. So it's originally 300, and then you put in JH30YT, and then apply. And you'll see that it takes $90 off. So that's a good enough savings. Certainly well worth your time, hopefully for 1 hour. If and also note, it's not just for this exam. You could use it on any BTA exam. So if you want to take Hyperledger or Ethereum, definitely do that. Now, for those um, that don't have Pearson, I did want to just show you the courses that are available. And then also, I do have practice questions on Udemy as well. And again, if you're interested in that, let me know. Just I'll just send you a discount code. I don't have them ready available. I'm not trying to use this to, sell you courses. I'm just trying to help you out if you do want to proceed with additional learning. Now, go to Safari and type in CBSA. I hold a live session that's 8 hours. It's 8 hours of training, and this just was released. April 2nd is the next one available. However, there is a video course as well that's on demand that is about 5.5 hours, and it goes through all the objectives for the exam. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining. If there's any questions, I'm happy to hang out and answer them. If not, I wish you all luck. And it looks like we have a question from Kothila. Kothia, hopefully I said your name close enough. Sorry if I mispronounced it. Once we pay the fee, yes, so you have 1 year to take the exam. Now, the discount code is good until June. So you want to use it until June. And then they like to recycle the codes after a few months. So I hope that answered your question. So you could schedule this within a year on Pearson. So basically you get the voucher code and then you'll get access to Pearson to schedule it. Okay. I hope that helped. All right, great. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. This will also post on YouTube shortly after. You can always go back. Now, make sure you check out my YouTube channel. I have a blockchain basically section on YouTube that you could view that I have mini sessions that are pretty much all PowerPoints. So take a look at those videos. That's direct content that I usually would teach courses with. With that said, have a great night.